Achewillow. Season 8. Chapter 2. The Graveyard Heist. Enemies to friends is a tired trope in entertainment. The recipe is simple. Put two diametrically opposite individuals into a bowl, beat vigorously until they look like nothing but violence. Add a dash of shared life experience, toss in a dramatic catharsis, stir, bake in the crucible of common purpose for 15 minutes, let cool. If only relationships were as simple as cake, my life would have been so much easier. Truth is, real people are not like ingredients. They're shifting and changing, never the same from one experience to the next. They carry their past like a hidden aftertaste. Take your eye off them for a minute or a week, and they come back with a completely different flavor profile. By all means, try this recipe. Follow it to the letter. Pick your ingredients like a chef at a farmer's market, smelling the catharsis for freshness and feeling the texture of conflict to make sure you get the most succulent available. Preheat your oven to the perfect temperature to heat tempers. Make no mistake at any step of the process, but take it from me, all you're cooking up is trouble. And I should know. I'm an expert at both baking and messing up relationships. Ophelia and I have gone through all the steps. We even have a common friend that should serve as a perfect bridge between us. Yet, the closer I get to her, the more I miss wanting to punch Ophelia. I do my best to offer olive branch after olive branch, enough to crush the proverbial dove, but none of it feels natural. Something bitter has found its way into the mixing bowl. Not the aesthetic I expected from you, Ophelia declares as I let her into Doris's apartment. My apartment. It's been a while since I stopped thinking of it as the home of my deceased great-grandaunt. Over a year, easily. But that one observation, like tweezers plucking a hair off a sweater, removes the familiar notion. Ophelia's right. This is not my aesthetic. Some of it is, but these are still an old woman's furniture, with an old woman's accents and color choices. I've removed none of Doris's souvenirs and framed photos that crowd the corridor's leftmost wall. Even the smell is the same today as it was when I first moved in. And again, I doubt the smell of butter, sugar, and warmth would be any different no matter where I live. Of course, I'd keep a lot of what's here. I'd refresh the paint on the walls and maybe change the dining room set. I should archive her photos and start putting up my own souvenirs. A new duvet and curtains in the bedroom wouldn't kill anyone either. But I would keep some of the charm of Doris's apartment. Ophelia walks down the corridor with the pace of an art student at a museum. She drinks in every photo of Doris, every event that my great-grandaunt documented. She stops at a gap between the frames, where I once had a tall, full-length mirror hung, but she refrains from comment. Instead, her fingers brush against the wall, feeling the texture. Her cat William pokes his head out of her bag, also appraising the myriad of photos on display. It's almost 3 o'clock in the morning. I have a coffee shop to open up in 3 hours. My head still spins a little from the evening's drinking. I'm about to put an end to this dilly-dallying when Ophelia stops in her tracks. Her nimble little fingers, always so adroit and steady, reach out to one of the smaller frames. They come short of touching the glass surface when William lets out a low growl. Ophelia pulls her offending hand back, clutching at her shawl instead. From my end of the corridor, she looks like a child burdened with terrible guilt. "You good?" I ask, surprising myself with how worried I am. "I'm fine," she whimpers, wiping at her nose with her sleeve. "Allergies." "Sure," I say, making a mental note of the frame she was looking at. "Let me get you a pillow and some sheets while you settle in." It's been a minute since I've had anyone sleep on the couch. Not since my brother Eric moved to town have I had a need. Everyone's settling into adulthood with all their adult things, and we all have our own homes now, like adults. It takes a moment to rummage and find clean sheets, a comforter that's not too dusty, and a pillow that's not too flat. Every time I walk past the kitchen, I'm tempted to go in and make something. A hot chocolate with a touch of chamomile or lavender. Or I'm sure I have some strawberries and could rustle up some balsamic and basil dressing for them. Anything to soothe my guest. Instead, I pull up a chair and take out some homemade maple sugar ice cream. So, I ask, what's the plan? Should be simple enough, she explains, carefully folding her shawl over the back of a chair. When Mom was killed, we only had her body but no head. Now that you and I got her skull back, I need to bury it with the rest of her. On the equinox, the veil is thin, so her spirit will be easier to appease, and maybe she'll get some rest. I put 2 scoops per bowl that I then bring over to the dining room table. I've rarely seen Ophelia without a shawl or a knit sweater. She's thinner than I remembered, pale and almost skeletal herself. And this has to be done at night? I ask, trying not to protest too much. Well, I don't want to explain to the church why I carry Mom's skull in my bag, and the veil is even thinner near midnight. I feel like Gulliver would be more help. I look at her frail little arms. It'll take the 2 of us forever to dig that deep. She digs into the ice cream, giving no hint of her opinion. Not that I'm that eager to impress Ophelia, but a raised eyebrow or a nod of appreciation would be nice. Eddie isn't an option. You should know that. I do not, in fact, know that. I have no idea what she's talking about. But just as I'm about to push on the topic, the squealing of an ill-oiled door whines from the back of the kitchen. Perfect timing, I lament to a sudden chorus of hissing. Abandoning chairs, ice cream, and patience, Ophelia and I rise as one, each going for our own target. Brioche has picked this very moment to make her entrance, and I doubt the sight of a big orange cat in her territory was what she expected. Come on, I say, picking up my raccoon. Poor thing looks positively offended at the intruder. I've seen Brioche angry before, but it's a rare occurrence and usually directed at the occasional demon. Or an orange familiar. Hush, William, Ophelia admonishes. We're guests. Behave like one. Please keep your familiar in line, Miriam. A trip to the vet is the last thing I need after what you've put me through. She's not my familiar, I start, but catch myself. Wait, what? What do you mean, put you through? I catch a glimpse of the 2 of us, reflected in the dark mirror of the kitchen window. 2 young women holding furious furballs and facing off with anger of our own. She looks minuscule. Don't play dumb with me, she says, flipping William over her shoulder. You think I don't know who set those 2 inquisitors after me? Not many people with intimate knowledge of what I do here that's also petty enough to do such a thing. Well, damn. I try to hold Brioche so she won't be facing the cat anymore, but she'll have none of it. Instead, she scratches and snarls, begging to be put on the floor, but I'm too numb to do anything. Like milk left on the counter, it was only a matter of time before the situation turned. The hell you didn't, she spits, all civility gone. It took everything to stay afloat. They took my business. They took my savings. They took everything. Financial excommunication, they called it. Debts she didn't know she had. Creditors coming out of the woodwork. The Inquisition doesn't burn or stone witches anymore. They bury them in debts and paperwork. They execute with bureaucracy. I'm sorry, I say while she fumes. I didn't think it would go that far. I can try to call them off, maybe even make up some of the damage. Eyes closed, she shakes her head. No. This is what I'm asking from you. You're going to help me bury my mother. You'll bake whatever you need to bake to appease her spirit and let her rest. Then I can put this whole Dufour saga behind me. Appease a ghost. I can do that. I've done it almost half-dozen times by now. I'll need Ophelia to contribute a little, but I doubt she'll put up a fight. In fact, if anyone understands how all of this works, it's her. As much as I hate to admit it, she is the better witch. I nod and sit back down, averting my eyes. Guilt isn't a garment I wear well. It sags on me, hanging heavy on my shoulders. Another glance at the window and Ophelia doesn't look so small anymore. Now, she says, setting William loose on the table to eat her ice cream. Let's come up with how we'll be doing this. The last thing I need is to get caught grave robbing in your company. I imitate her, allowing Brioche to have a go at my ice cream. It's not like I have the appetite for it any longer. She's not my familiar, I say, stumbling over topics to avoid my regrets. Pardon? Brioche, the raccoon. She's not my familiar. She's barely a pet. She smiles. Not a warm smile, but not one laced with any venom either. It's as sincere an expression as it can be, but one that conveys pity more than sympathy or joy. She scratches the orange cat behind his ears as he ignores her in favor of the ice cream. You really don't know a damn thing, do you? I'm never doing this again. At least, that's what I tell myself as I walk back into the Achewillow Cafe, mere hours after leaving it. An evening of eating, gossiping, and drinking, followed by Ophelia's dramatic request, didn't put me in a state of mind to clean up after myself. When was the last time I left the cafe in such disarray before closing down? There are uneaten cookies and brownies on the counter, water still in the kettle, and dirty dishes all over the kitchen. I even left the lights on. Sloppy. Thankfully, all the damage I wrought was done after my diligent employee Stefan had already closed up. Floors were swept, leftovers dutifully stored in the refrigerator, chairs on every table. The boy is a miracle, and I dread the day he figures out he could do better elsewhere. I put the framed photo I brought with me face down on the counter. There's a lot to do to get the Achewillow ready for customers, and I'm already late. Clients are lining up outside, waiting for their morning coffee, even on a Saturday. They're my usuals for this hour. The painter Michael and his friend Pat, old Phyllis Baker, who moved to town over the summer, and Ernest Dillinger, who always looks like he's got a million things to do and orders 2 coffees every morning, one black and the other with 3 sugar and 3 creams. They wait, chit-chatting with each other under the early morning sun. I start the coffee machine and pull down chairs, invigorated by the smell of a fresh brew permeating the air. Good morning, Miss Dufour, Pat greets me as I open the door. How are we today? He's a nice enough man, very private and soft-spoken. He orders a breakfast sandwich and coffee, as he usually does. Both are already prepared by the time he's done paying. Fantastic, I lie. Weather looks nice and apple season is upon us. We exchange smiles and he leaves with his victuals. All of my waiting patrons do the same, place their orders, exchange pleasantries, and go about their business. Michael shows a little bit more concern, but overall, I maintain the lie. But I am not doing fantastic. I've only managed to squeeze in a couple of hours of sleep. There's a long shift ahead of me, and while Saturdays are usually less busy in the morning, they make up for it the rest of the day. Kids will come in for sweet treats, and by lunch the out-of-towners will start to pile in for a quick bite before going back to whatever brought them out to Achewillow in the first place. After Stefan shows up for his shift, I have to start preparing our equinox feast. You'd think a couple of witches and friends would have all sorts of spooky things planned for the evening, a seance or some tarot readings. No. The original plan was to just have dinner, try some wine, and watch a comedy at Annabelle's place. Of course, I can't just make dinner. There'll be no tossing of a frozen pizza and some store-bought spanakopita into the oven from me. I have 4 pages of my notepad filled with menu items that need preparing. Salmon and stuffed mushrooms for appetizers, some onion canapes for cocktails. I need to prepare pear gratinée and fresh whipped cream for dessert and, of course, the star of the event, homemade fettuccine alfredo with no fewer than 4 cheeses, none of which I've had time to purchase yet. In a perfect world, that would have been enough. But this isn't a perfect world, and now I've got to revise my ingredient list to add 1 more seat to the table. Then, instead of going to bed late on a full stomach, I have to go dig around in the soil of Achewillow Cemetery like a ghoul. Oh, and did I mention I have to bake a cake, too?
You look in a foul mood.
Annabelle interrupts my train of thought. The haze of a mild hangover, exhaustion, and too many things to think about have kept me on autopilot all morning. I barely noticed the dining room filling up, or even Annabelle's walking in. It's been a night, I offer as an explanation.
You didn't kill her, did you?
No, I sigh. We're well past that. We had ice cream and talked about pets. Are you still up for running errands this morning? She stands straight and gives me a military salute.
Of course, mon capitaine,
she says, beaming with mischief.
Whatever you need.
Excellent. I have a few extra stops, if you don't mind. She finally takes a seat as I bring her coffee. One thing I've come to appreciate about Achewillow is how little people care about weird things. I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg, but there's a nonchalance regarding talks of all things weird and wonderful. I suppose if you've lived your whole life under a suspicious cloud, ghosts at the local arena, and spectral albino bats flitting about the local park, it takes a little more to raise an eyebrow. Or maybe it's the opposite. The locals' tolerance for the bizarre invites the oddities to take up residence. Either way, I can discuss all manner of weird magical business in the open without attracting attention.
Anything to do with our upcoming graveyard heist?
Annabelle asks, knowing full well it does. Yep. I've already texted Petunia, so we have a lookout, but I need you to stop by the bank and see if Eric's up for it. They don't allow him his phone while he's working the counter. He's our muscle. Then I need you to go to Stefano Hardware and get a shovel. She frowns mid-sip of her coffee.
What kind of shovel?
I don't know. A grave-digging shovel?
Oh, sure,
she says with naked sarcasm.
I'll just ask Stefano for his very best grave-digging shovel. Oh, maybe he'll have 2 for 1.
I shake my head and roll my eyes. Absent-minded, I pop open a glass jar next to the register and pull out an almond biscotti. The sweet smell of nuts and vanilla wafts from the container, tantalizing with promises of subtle but delightful flavors. I was never a biscotti girl, but ever since I cracked the code of Doris's recipe, I've developed a taste for them, especially if I need to break something dramatically with my teeth. I'd say being a smartass doesn't suit you, but we both know you wear it like a second skin. She stands from her stool and reaches over the counter, stretching her arm all the way to the glass jar. Nudging it with the tip of her fingers, she manages to get a grip on it.
You all get to drink and have fun,
she says, pulling off the lid to offer herself one of my biscotti.
A girl's got to keep herself entertained.
She dunks her prize in her cup, letting it soak for a second before bringing it to her mouth. With a smile as smug as it is wide, she puts the biscotti down her throat and attempts to take a bite. I don't know if Annabelle was too busy exaggerating her attitude or just clumsy, but she jams that biscotti so far into her gullet she nearly chokes herself. She coughs and gags, punching the counter with her fist a few times. Her face is red and tears run down her eyes while snot drips from her nose. She looks horrible, and half the dining room has turned their attention to her. After a second of this, she hacks out a chunk of sodden biscotti, spitting it right onto the framed photo I'd left on the counter. "Are you okay?" I ask, leaning over to see her face better. Poor Annabelle's forehead is resting on the countertop, but she gives me a thumbs up while coughing a little more. "Water?" I ask, teasing at this point.
"Please,"
she wheezes in reply. I oblige, bringing back a handful of paper towels to wipe the counter, Annabelle's face, and the back of the frame. She's still catching her breath, panting between each sip of water when she notices the photo I'm attempting to clean.
Sorry about that,
she manages to say after a few attempts.
It's fine,
I say.
Didn't your mom teach you how to chew food?
I mock my friend, but in my defense, I've grown familiar with the difference between someone who's actually in danger of choking to death and someone who's got their pipes confused for a second. The benefits of a first aid class and years working at various eateries. At some point, you learn when someone simply forgot to masticate.
I'll add it to the list of things Mom didn't bother teaching me,
she says, her good humor struggling to come back.
What's that?
Annabelle is pointing at the framed photo, analyzing the subject of the picture. It's a portrait of Doris, of course. All of the frames in her apartment catalog my great-grandaunt's life. Each can be traced to an event she must have thought important enough to archive on her walls. Some are more obvious than others, depicting Doris at weddings or graduations. Others seem more subtle and include family members that seem vaguely familiar but otherwise don't ring a bell. All of them show off some of her cooking. This one's of Doris at what looks like a barbecue. I recognize the back of Pickering Farmhouse here in Achewillow, along with the familiar tree line of the neighboring forest. The old woman is beaming, as she often is in those photos. She's touching heads with a young girl with straight, dirty blonde hair and an equally delighted grin. Both are looking at the camera, holding plates with slices of meringue-topped key lime pie. I'm not sure, I say, flipping the frame to look at it anew. I was going to ask Olivia when she came in, but it sure rattled Ophelia when she saw it. Here, in the northeastern provinces and states, we love to layer, especially in the fall. I don't know if it comes from a reluctance to leave summer behind or laziness at taking out our thick winter coats, but by and large we'd rather put a hoodie over a sweater than get the parka. September winds have turned on me, making the walk over to Annabelle's apartment less pleasant than expected. Or perhaps it has nothing to do with the weather. I've got a long-sleeve t-shirt, a snug turtleneck, and a thick burgundy sweater with a massive printed maple leaf in front to keep me warm. Maybe it's the company I keep through the journey. I know Ophelia can be pleasant. Like a shooting star, you kind of have to be at the right place and right time to witness the event, and you have to pay attention, but it does happen. However, after admitting she knew my part in getting the Inquisition on her case, she's gone back to her most unpleasant self. Going down Rue Principale, she stops for a moment to look wistfully at the empty building where her knitting shop used to be. The business, a victim of the Inquisition's financial attack, meant a lot to her. Maybe even as much as the Achewillow Cafe has grown to mean to me. And she makes sure I know that with the long, wounded sigh she lets out at the sight. The plan is obviously to twist the knife of reality into the wound of my guilt, and it works. I get it. I deserve this. But must she be so passive-aggressive about it? Come on, I urge, eager to spend as little time here as possible. I've got a lot of cooking to do. We make it to Annabelle's without exchanging another word. Ophelia's chill thaws when interacting with my friends. She thanks Annabelle for having her over, and even produces a set of 4 knitted cozies for drinks. She reintroduces herself to Petunia, who, as is her habit, welcomes her with overwhelming warmth, turning a handshake into a hug. For the first time, I feel like cooking isn't bringing me closer to those around me. The kitchen is just off the living room, with cabinets and a short piece of countertop separating the 2 rooms. I unpack my ingredients and other essentials, putting everything into a neat array in front of me. My friends laugh and catch up, but I missed the first few exchanges and I don't get the joke. I set my wooden spoon next to the paper package that I know contains 2 pounds of the most succulent salmon I could find in Achewillow.
Let me get us something to drink,
Annabelle announces before pulling out a bottle of wine. It's nothing fancy, but we all feel very adult drinking our screw-top Cabernet out of actual wine glasses instead of vodka and orange juice or hard lemonade. Someone says something that starts an argument as I sear the fish, missing the salient parts of the conversation again. Prepared dishes accumulate around me as I finish my plating, and with each piece of salmon, drizzle of glaze, or sprig of fennel I arrange, I feel the distance between me and my friends grow. Then there's Annabelle.
$50,
she says, leaning on the counter.
That's a lot for a shovel,
I reply, giving her 2 plates to carry.
Not that I know the first thing about shovels, mind you. And,
she says, putting down each plate at a different seat, careful to set the one with mushrooms where Petunia is sitting.
We can just return it tomorrow. That doesn't seem right,
Petunia says, taking her utensils.
Just give it to the figs.
We're sitting to break bread, debating the fate of the vulgar shovel while avoiding the proverbial elephant in the room. I'm showered with the usual bevy of compliments for my cooking, which I've learned to accept with grace. We all have a taste of Pete's portobello and collectively decide that it's easily as good as the salmon, if not better. I make a note for future menus. Night inevitably falls, turning the view from Annabelle's window into a mirror of our gathering. Time is running out, and just as summer is about to breathe its last, we soon have to be about our business.
So,
I say, pouring myself one last glass of wine.
What's the plan, Ophelia?
We leave the apartment around 11. The sound of crickets greets us outside the block where Annabelle lives with my brother. What a strange foursome we must be to outsiders. Boisterous Petunia, chatting with wild arm movements with the reserved Ophelia. Annabelle, proudly walking with her brand new shovel over her shoulder. And me, looking at them, nonchalant about the morbid business that brings us out at this hour. Eric is waiting for us in front of the Achewillow. His hair is disheveled, which tells me he's probably spent the evening at the gym. The hint of garlic on his breath testifies that he had dinner at the Italian restaurant across the street from the park. Traitor.
Didn't feel like joining us for dinner?
I question as he gets in step with our little group.
I thought this was just for the girls,
he laments with a smile on his face. As if a matter of fact, he takes the shovel from Annabelle and puts it on his own shoulder. It looks a lot more natural on his frame than it does on hers. Looking at our reflection in the Achewillow's front window, we look like a gaggle of mismatched children being led by an adult.
Oh, come on,
Petunia says, grabbing his arm.
You count.
Well,
I had other things to do,
he answers, a little bashful. Annabelle and Pete descend on him, speculating that Eric was out on a date, pestering him with questions about the new beau and demanding all the juicy details.
They know we're going to dig up my dead mother, don't they?
Ophelia says, matching my pace behind the rest of our group. Poor girl looks more bewildered than offended. Her posture remains reserved as always, with both hands on the strap of her large bag, but she's wearing a glum frown as she watches them.
They know,
I reassure.
I'm sure they're just trying to not think about it too much. They don't mean any disrespect.
By the time we make it to Achewillow Cemetery, the town has slowed its breathing and fallen to slumber. There are still plenty of houses with lights on, and I bet more than a few people celebrating the equinox in their own ways, but the burial ground looks empty. The waxing moon is climbing up the horizon, casting a shy glow over our activities. We stop at the wrought iron gate, and Petunia pulls out her phone.
All right,
she whispers to Ophelia.
I'll stay here and make sure no one else comes to pay any late-night respects. I'll text you if anyone gets too curious.
I take one last look around, making sure our group, especially our shovel, isn't noticed by anyone. Annabelle pulls out a large, high-powered flashlight from her bag, and we start on our way. The Achewillow Cemetery doesn't look all that large, but there are a few trees and several sections that branch off from this or that corner. The irregular shape hides the actual acreage of the burial grounds, something I've come to learn in the last few months. Ophelia takes the lead, and the group's demeanor changes as we pass through the iron gates. A delicate silence falls over us, and I notice that Eric looks particularly somber. It's almost as if all of our past whimsy was but a wicker shield that went up in flames once tested by the fires of our circumstances. We're no longer children going out for mischief in the local cemetery. We are but mortals coming to dance with the dead when the veil is thin. We bring with us morbid intent and the tools to pierce it further. The feeble lights of the street abandon us as we trek deeper between tightly packed graves. Gentle moonlight brushes our skin, giving it a slight luminescence that the headstones lack. No one could blame the dead for being jealous of our light. It dawns on me as I listen to our footsteps on the gravel path that we are the witches of Achewillow, assembled for the first time with grim purpose.
There she is,
Ophelia says, stopping in front of a modest marker on the ground. As with many of the stones here, it's little more than a block of granite with a name, years, and a loving epitaph. Here lies Diane Cerejo, devoted mother, servant to the community, 1973 to 2003. A quilt without thread cannot hold.
She died young,
I mentioned, struck by the tragedy of it.
She was killed young,
Ophelia makes a point of specifying. The bitter note in her voice is like a drop of lemon juice in milk, so small that it should go unnoticed, but it curdles nonetheless. What am I supposed to answer to that? My natural proclivity is to offer words of comfort. Back at the cafe, I would brew up some tea. I have a blend of chamomile and orange zest that does a great job of calming while loosening the tongue. Then, over a cookie or flaky treat, I'd listen to my client spill their heart. Ophelia, however, has always been a knot too complex for me to untie. She's curdled milk that I can't even use for pancakes or to thicken soup. We spend a minute in silence, Eric, the most uncomfortable of us, waiting to do the terrible deed he's been drafted to do.
I think
Annabelle's voice is less than an octave above the ambient wind.
I think we should get this over with.
Yeah, Eric concurs, putting the blade of my brand new shovel at the foot of Diane's plot. I don't do the witchy stuff, and even I can tell the dead don't want us here. William pops his head out of Ophelia's bag, hissing his agreement. His green eyes are like glowing emeralds, giving off a similar light as those of my raccoons. We all look to Ophelia for her blessing. She nods. As one, we all get to work. Eric sets his foot on the shovel, pushing it into the packed soil with all his might and weight. Ophelia sits on the ball of her foot, careful to fan her skirt around her so it doesn't collect too much cemetery dust. A bad omen. Reverent, she pulls out the skull of her mother, wrapped this time in a deep blue shawl that is as complex as it is beautiful. It's so intricate it might as well be lace. That just leaves me. With perhaps less grace and poise, I lower myself to one knee, removing my bag from my shoulder. Annabelle offers a hand, keeping the bag open while I take out a large cake box containing my contribution. William hisses again. I look up to see him circling his master. His back is round and his tail swishes around like a fencer's sword. Eric is making good time on his digging, especially for someone who's never dug a grave before. As far as I know. I flip open the lid of my box, releasing the sharp aroma of lemon and apricot from my offering. William growls, ears flat on his head. He hisses again, but this time there's a target to his venom. A woman cries in the distance. In unison, we turn to look, following the cat's vitriolic gaze. What we see is no woman. Two blue, glowing dots gaze back at us from the top of a mound near an oak tree. It's a fox, and there is nothing but baleful anger in its eyes. Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.